If you crack this code, I'll wipe your family's debt clean. When Robert Chen, known for 15 years as the most punctual merchant in the neighborhood, finds himself zip-tied to a heavy wooden chair inside a derelict warehouse, everyone in the room realizes something has gone devastatingly wrong. Vincent Moretti, the cold-blooded loan shark everyone calls Vinny, slides a crumpled sheet of paper in front of him with a sinister grin. Because everyone in the district knew one thing for certain: Robert Chen never owed a dime to anyone. He was the man of gold, the man of his word. The air in the warehouse is thick and stagnant, smelling of old motor oil mixed with the damp, suffocating mold of peeling brick walls. Far above, water droplets fall from a leaking, rusted pipe in the ceiling, marking the heavy silence with a steady, rhythmic thud that sounds like a countdown. A single, naked light bulb sways slowly on a frayed wire, casting long, dancing shadows against the cracked walls. Robert's white dress shirt is torn at the shoulder, revealing skin bruised by the struggle. His hands are trembling behind the chair, yet his eyes remain steady, almost unnervingly calm. Vinny furrows his brow, confused by the lack of fear. Kane, the hulking enforcer standing closest to the door, shifts his grip on the black pistol tucked into his waistband and takes a cautious step back. Something about Robert's posture doesn't fit the image of a broken, desperate man. But Robert wasn't there because of a gambling debt or a common loan gone bad. He was there because 7 months ago he had purposefully and methodically infiltrated the Shark's criminal network. The $320,000 debt crushing his family's future was the perfect bait to earn Vinny's dark trust. Robert Chen was actually an undercover operative working with a federal task force in a high-stakes operation targeting international money laundering. Vinny lets out a sharp, nervous laugh, stroking his signature perfectly groomed mustache. Robert had always seemed like easy prey, a quiet, hard-working immigrant, but now he acts differently. He is too confident, too still. Kane tightens his grip on his weapon. He sensed something was off since Robert entered the warehouse without a single word of resistance. Nora Vance, the scheme's brilliant and cold accountant, watches from the deep shadows in the corner. Her mind, sharp as a razor, has already recognized the signature pattern of a federal investigation. She knows she needs to alert the powerful bosses above Vinny before the trap snaps shut. But this story didn't start in this dark warehouse. It began 7 months ago when Robert Chen was handed the most perilous mission the Bureau had ever proposed. Robert, still emotionally shattered by the recent and painful death of his wife, accepted the impossible task. He kept a secret that could destroy both his family and his career. He was using his family's real, crushing debt as a cover for his deep-cover infiltration. The truth had layers of betrayal and pain that even he hadn't imagined at the start of this long, lonely road. To understand how Robert Chen, a quiet, peaceful man who spent 30 years building an honest life, ended up tied to a chair in this warehouse, about to reveal his secret identity, you need to know 3 stories. The story of who he was before the shadows took over. The story of the day he lost everything and accepted the mission. And the story of what he sacrificed to protect Maya, the teenage daughter who still knows nothing of the danger. It all began on a grey, freezing morning in January. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon. Thousands of people have already discovered that true courage has no age, no borders, and no nationality. Don't miss this gripping story of sacrifice and redemption. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell. Thousands of people your age have already discovered it's never too late to start over, even when the world is crumbling. Don't miss the next story that could change your life. 7 months earlier, Robert Chen woke up every day at exactly 5:30 a.m., always 15 minutes before the alarm was set to ring. He lived in a modest, narrow 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood of old brick buildings and rusted fire escapes. At 52, he had the lean, resilient build of a man who had spent 3 decades on his feet, working toward a dream. His hair was completely silver, cropped short in a military style. His hands were calloused and rough, marked by small, pale scars from decades of kitchen knives and splatters of hot oil. Every morning he followed the same ritual. He prepared green tea, ate 2 slices of dry whole wheat toast, and walked the 20 minutes to the Golden Dragon, the small, bustling restaurant he had opened with his wife 17 years ago. In the local community, Robert was known as a man of ironclad word. He paid his suppliers on the dot, never missed a rent payment even in the leanest months, and returned every single cent of change to his customers. His defining trait was an absolute, almost stubborn integrity, something whispered about in respectful, hushed tones by the elders who gathered on the sidewalks. But Robert had a flaw that many in the modern world saw as naivety. He trusted the system too much. He truly believed that honest work always won in the end, that following the rules was a shield that protected the innocent. His more traditional friends often joked that he was too American at heart, which wasn't exactly a compliment in their tighter, more cynical circles. Robert's life changed forever a year ago when Lillian May, his beloved wife and partner, died of pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis had come far too late, but Robert refused to give up. He fought with everything he had. He drained every single cent of their hard-earned savings on experimental treatments, $180,000, saved over 15 years of sweat and toil. He sold the family car, took out predatory loans, and eventually mortgaged the very walls of the restaurant. Nothing worked. Lillian was gone in 3 short months. Since then, Robert had built massive emotional walls around his heart. He didn't cry in public, he didn't talk about his grief, and he stiffly refused all hugs of condolence. He lived on a cold autopilot, opening the metal shutters, cooking for 12 hours, closing and returning to a house that felt hauntingly empty. This emotional shutdown hit Maya, his 17-year-old daughter, the hardest. She desperately needed a father to grieve with, but she found only a mechanical, silent shell of a man. Robert's secret dream, the one he guarded like a forbidden treasure, was to see Maya graduate as a doctor from a prestigious university. He kept all her report cards in a worn blue folder, tucked away alongside glossy college brochures and complex spreadsheets detailing the soaring tuition costs. He considered this dream impossible now because the medical debts from Lillian's final months had ballooned with predatory interest rates. He now owed a staggering $320,000 across various banks and shadow lenders. He never told Maya how truly desperate the situation was, maintaining a perfect facade that they would be fine. He kept that dream locked away like a hidden shame, terrified that his failure would become her burden. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday in May when Robert first met Special Agent Claire Halloway. She walked into the Golden Dragon during the peak of the lunch rush, ordered a simple plate of chow mein and a pot of jasmine tea, and chose a seat in the far corner. As she ate, she observed the room with a focused intensity that Robert recognized instantly, the kind of predatory gaze that catalogues every exit, every person, and every subtle movement. When she finally paid the bill, she thanked him in a perfect, fluent Mandarin, which caught Robert completely off guard. As she stood to leave, she slid a discreet business card under her saucer. "Federal Bureau. I need to speak with you privately. It's about your safety." Robert felt his stomach drop into a cold pit. 2 days later, Robert and Claire met at a quiet, discreet cafe 3 neighborhoods away, where no one would recognize them. She didn't sugarcoat the reality. "Mr. Chen, I know about the debt, $320,000. I also know that Moretti's sharks have approached you 3 times this month alone." Robert tried to keep his composure, though his hands shook slightly under the table. "I will settle it honestly. I have always lived my life honestly." Claire leaned in, her voice low and urgent. "What if I told you that you could settle that debt while helping us dismantle an international criminal network and protect Maya's future in the process?" The mention of his daughter made Robert freeze. "How do you know my daughter's name?" Claire sighed, a flicker of empathy in her eyes. "Because this network is already watching your family, Robert. They target men exactly like you, honest, debt-ridden, with families they can use as a knife to your throat." Robert felt a sudden surge of protective anger. "What do you want from me?" "Infiltrate them, accept the loan they're going to offer, gain Vinny's trust, collect the evidence we need." "That's suicide," Robert whispered. "No," Claire replied. "That's survival, for you and most importantly for Maya." A bond formed in that moment. Both were parents who understood the weight of protection. Claire had a son in college, Robert had Maya. They both knew that for a child, a parent would walk through fire. 3 days later, Robert returned to the cafe. Claire brought a thick file on the operation. "Before you agree, Robert, you have to promise me one thing." Robert stared at her, his jaw set. "What?" "If you take this on, you go all the way to the end. You don't quit when it gets dark. Lives depend on this, not just yours." Robert took a deep, shaky breath. "If I do this, I do it right. I've done everything right my whole life. I won't stop now." Claire extended her hand, and Robert shook it firmly. That promise, witnessed only by a bored barista in the background, would eventually cost Robert everything he held dear. But in that moment, he still believed he could control the storm. The Golden Dragon was a place of ghosts. It was tucked between a noisy fabric wholesaler and a small, dusty hardware store. It was a cramped space, with 15 dark, polished wood tables, walls decorated with faded paper dragons, and deep red lanterns hanging from the ceiling. The air was a constant, comforting swirl of sautéed ginger, reducing soy sauce, and toasted sesame oil. The kitchen was an orchestra of clattering woks and hushed, rhythmic conversations. The lighting was always warm and dim, casting a golden, nostalgic glow over the diners. Near the entrance sat the small altar with Lillian's photo, where fresh incense burned every single day. Next to it was a Best of the Neighborhood trophy from 2023. It wasn't just a business, it was the physical manifestation of his life's work and his wife's memory. In Robert's world, the Merchants Association held the true, unspoken power of the streets. Uncle Henry, the 68-year-old president, had the power to make a business flourish or wither away. Decisions were made in the back rooms during closed meetings, always in their native tongue, always among the families who had been there the longest. Robert, who had arrived later in life and didn't come from a traditional merchant lineage, was always viewed as a respected outsider. The rules were simple on the surface. Pay your taxes, follow the law of the land, but the unwritten rules were much harder to navigate. Never air the community's dirty laundry to the Americans. Solve all problems internally, and above all, never involve the police in community business. Breaking these rules meant social exile and a slow, silent bankruptcy. Robert was respected for his honesty, but many of the older merchants saw him as dangerously naive for trusting the system so much. He was loved by his customers and tolerated by the elders, but he was never truly part of the inner sanctum. The first real sign of trouble arrived on a humid June morning. The vegetable supplier, Mr. Wu, a man Robert had known for a decade, suddenly doubled his prices. Robert questioned him politely, searching for a reason. "Inflation," was the dry, clipped reply. Mr. Wu wouldn't even meet his eyes. Robert accepted it, trusting his friend and believing it was a temporary market shift. 2 days later, Maya came home from school looking troubled. "Dad, I saw Uncle Henry today. He stopped me and asked if you were having money problems. It was weird. He looked at me with pity." Robert forced a reassuring smile. "It's just neighborhood gossip, honey. You know how people are when they have too much time on their hands." But in his gut, a knot was tightening. The very next day, his neighbor at the hardware store pulled him into a dark aisle. "Chen, be careful. Henry is asking questions about your bank loans. People are saying you're drowning and you're going to pull others down with you." Robert brushed it off with his habitual optimism. Honest work had always been his shield. Why would it fail him now when he needed it most? It was a Friday afternoon, just as the sun began to dip behind the skyscrapers, when Vincent Moretti first walked into the Golden Dragon. He was a man in his late 40s, wearing a suit that cost more than Robert made in a month. Tattoos peeked over his starch-white collar, and heavy gold chains hung around his neck. He had that signature sharp mustache that gave him the look of a movie villain. He sat at the table nearest the door, ordered a single beer, and didn't touch a bite of the food Robert served him. He just sat there, cold and calculating, watching the rhythm of the restaurant for a full hour. When he finally rose to leave, he leaned over the counter and told the waitress, "Tell the cook I heard he needs a lifeline. Tell him Vinny can make his problems go away." Robert felt a sudden, icy chill. He asked around about the man. "That's Moretti, a shark, a predator. He's connected to the kind of people who make families disappear. Stay far away, Robert." Robert felt a temporary wave of relief because he didn't owe criminals anything. He was safe in his honesty, or so he desperately hoped. 3 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday night, Robert and Maya had dinner alone in the darkened, closed restaurant. Maya proudly showed him her latest grades, straight A's in every subject. She was at the top of her class, a star pupil. Robert's chest tightened with an agonizing mix of immense pride and soul-crushing fear. He hugged her so tight it hurt. "You're going to be a doctor, Maya. I promise you on my life." Maya pulled back and looked at him, her young eyes seeing too much. "Dad, are you okay? You haven't really slept in weeks. You look hollow." Robert forced the most convincing smile of his life. "I'm great, Maya. I've never been better, just a little tired from the rush." It was a lie that tasted like ash. He was terrified. The photo of Lillian on the altar seemed to watch them both in the flickering candlelight. Maya leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in the silence. It was the last moment of true peace they would share for a very long time. The storm was no longer gathering, it was here. It was that very promise to his daughter that 3 weeks later would drive Robert to make the most dangerous decision of his career. He would accept Vinny's blood money and officially begin the federal mission. On a Monday in August, the reality of his failure finally arrived. Robert found a manila envelope taped to the restaurant's front door. Inside was a formal foreclosure notice. The bank was moving in. He had exactly 60 days to pay $240,000, or he would lose the Golden Dragon forever. The paper shook so hard in his hand that it made a rattling sound. His body temperature seemed to plummet. He had to lean his weight against the cold metal doorframe just to keep from collapsing onto the sidewalk. His first panicked thought was of Maya. She can never find out. Then came the desperate denial. This has to be a clerical error. I've paid every month. A memory of Lillian's final hours flashed in his mind, her voice a ghost of a whisper. Take care of her, Robert, no matter what. He had promised her, and now he was failing the one person who mattered. He tried to find a logical exit. Could he sell the car? It was already gone. A new bank loan. His credit was a disaster. Help from the community. They were already turning their backs. The truth was a freezing realization. There was no honest way out of this grave. The phone rang that very afternoon. It was an unknown number, but Robert knew who it was before he answered. I heard the bank is knocking on your door, Robert. It was Vinny. His voice was smooth, casual, almost paternal. I can fix this for you. I'll loan you the $240. We'll call it a partnership. 40% interest, standard rate for a man in your position. But you get to keep your restaurant. You get to keep your wife's memory alive. Robert felt the jaws of the trap snap shut around his neck. I need to think. Think fast, Robert. My generosity has an expiration date. The offer is good until Friday at sunset. Vinny hung up without waiting for a reply. His waitresses had caught pieces of the conversation and were looking at him with a mixture of fear and deep pity. One of them, a woman who had worked for him for 5 years, approached him quietly. "Mr. Chen, I have $3,000 in my savings. It's yours, if it helps." Robert's eyes burned with unshed tears. He turned her down with a gentle hand on her shoulder. The air in the Golden Dragon felt like lead. Robert's first instinct, fueled by 30 years of habit, was to do it the right way. He spent 3 frantic days trying to liquidate every single thing of value he owned. He took Lillian's wedding watch to a jeweler. $15,000. He sold her small collection of family jewelry. $8,000. He tried to sell his backup kitchen equipment. $12,000. After 3 days of humiliating haggling, he only managed to scrape together $43,000. He called the bank, begging for a negotiation for more time. "We want the full balance in 10 days, or we move to auction," was the icy response. No exceptions for a grieving widower. He called 6 old friends from the community. 3 didn't even pick up the phone. 2 told him they were struggling themselves. 1 offered a measly $5,000. Robert's mind was a swirling hurricane of despair. If Lillian were here, she'd know how to talk to them. I'm failing her. Maybe I should just take Vinny's money, pay it back as fast as possible, and get out. But I don't deal with monsters. My word is my soul. But what if I have no soul left to save? What if Maya's life is destroyed because of my pride? On Thursday, Robert made one last, desperate attempt at salvation. He went to the Merchant Association to beg for a collective loan, a practice they had used for decades to save failing shops. Uncle Henry received him in a dim back room, flanked by 4 other stone-faced elders. Robert explained his situation with as much dignity as he could muster. Henry didn't even let him finish. "Robert, you were always too quick to trust their ways, their laws. Now you see the truth. The system doesn't care about us." Robert swallowed the bitter pill of humiliation. "I just need a bridge, Henry. A temporary loan. I'll pay it back with interest." The elders spoke among themselves in rapid Mandarin, ignoring him as if he weren't in the room. Finally, Henry spoke. "The association cannot risk the community's safety on such a compromised man. You owe too much, Robert. You are a high risk, and we cannot afford to be pulled down with you." The rejection felt like a physical blow. But there was still Claire. Robert called her in a total panic. She arrived in less than 20 minutes. "The offer is still on the table, Robert, but it's no longer just a request. Vinny is moving fast. We need you on the inside tonight." Robert realized then that this was never just about his debt. There was a war happening, and he was being drafted. Friday morning, the shaming began. Uncle Henry called an emergency meeting and demanded Robert attend. 14 merchants sat around a long table. Henry stood up and pointed a trembling finger at Robert. "This man is bringing the wolves to our door. Moretti's men are sniffing around our shops because of his failure." One merchant stood up, his face red with anger. "My neighbor said Vinny's enforcer was asking about my taxes." Another added, "He's exposing all of us to the sharks." Robert tried to stand his ground. "I didn't choose to be a target. I'm a victim here." Henry slammed his palm onto the table. "But you are the target, and now we all pay the price for your incompetence. You should handle this quietly. Leave the neighborhood if you have to. But don't you dare drag us into your grave." The public shaming was a calculated tactic to break his spirit. Robert left that meeting feeling destroyed, but for the first time in a year, a small spark of cold, hard anger began to glow in his chest. Vinny didn't even wait for the Friday deadline. Thursday night, just as the closed sign was being flipped, 3 men pushed their way into the restaurant. Kane, the enforcer with the dead eyes, sat at the table closest to the kitchen door. The other two stood like stone pillars blocking the exit. Vinny says, "You have 48 hours to sign the papers, or we start finding other ways to get what we're owed." Kane's eyes drifted over to Maya, who was at the cash register finishing the day's books. "She's a pretty girl, Robert. It would be a real tragedy if something unfortunate happened to her." Robert felt his blood turn into liquid fire. He walked straight up to Kane and looked him dead in the eye, ignoring the pistol on his hip. "Don't you ever say her name again! Don't you even look at her!" Kane just smirked, a jagged, ugly expression. "So, you taking the money or what?" Robert didn't say a word. The three men left the restaurant, their laughter echoing in the empty street. Maya was white as a ghost. "Dad, who were those people?" Robert couldn't hide the truth anymore. He sat her down and told her everything. The debt, the bank, the threats from Vinny. Maya began to sob, the sound breaking Robert's heart. "Why didn't you tell me? I can quit school. I can work 2 jobs. We can fix this together." The pain in Robert's chest was so sharp, he could barely breathe. He had tried so hard to protect her, and in his silence, he had only made the wound deeper. Claire Halloway appeared that night at his apartment, almost as if she'd been waiting for the final collapse. They sat in the dark of his kitchen. "Robert, listen to me. Vinny Moretti isn't just a local hood. He's a key player in an international laundering pipeline. They use debts like yours to recruit clean fronts, people like you, honest people with no records and perfect reputations. You are the perfect vessel to move millions of dollars of dirty money without ever raising a red flag." Robert felt a wave of nausea. How many others has he done this to? 17 that we've confirmed. There are likely dozens more. Why did he pick me? Because you're Robert Chen, the most honest man in the neighborhood. Everyone trusts you. Vinny will offer you easy favors to pay back the debt. Wire transfers, holding packages, making business trips. You'll say yes because you're drowning. And before you know it, you'll be so deep in the mud, you'll never see the sun again. Robert didn't sleep a single minute that night. At 4 a.m., he sat on the floor and pulled out a faded photo from a drawer. It was him, Lillian, and a baby Maya on the day they first arrived in the city, their faces glowing with hope. A memory of Lillian's voice echoed in the room. "We're going to build a life of honor here, Robert. We'll show them what we can contribute. We will never, ever bend our dignity for a shortcut." He had made that promise to her 30 years ago, and now he was about to shatter it. But it wasn't out of greed or weakness. It was a desperate act of love. Would she understand? Would Maya ever forgive him? He had spent his whole life choosing dignity, but now he was forced to choose survival. He was learning the hardest lesson of all. Love makes every moral choice a gray, agonizing mess. By Monday, the decision was made. Robert was at the restaurant when Kane walked in again, his presence like a dark cloud. "Vinny's out of patience, Robert. He wants an answer." Robert took a deep, steadying breath. "I'll take the loan. Tell him I'm in." Kane's grin was predatory. "Smart man. You just saved yourself a lot of grief." 2 hours later, Vinny showed up in person with a stack of legal-looking documents. Robert signed them all without reading. Within 20 minutes, $240,000 appeared in his bank account. "We're going to be legendary partners, Robert," Vinny said, clapping him on the back. That handshake sealed more than just a financial deal. It sealed Robert's life as a ghost. But neither of them knew there was a third player watching. Nora Vance, the accountant with the cold eyes, had been watching Robert's every move from a distance. She was beginning to suspect that Robert Chen was playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. The very next day, Robert saw a secret meeting forming at the Merchant Association. He slipped in through a side entrance he usually used for deliveries. The room was packed with terrified men. Uncle Henry was at the head of the table, his voice a low, frantic rumble. Robert caught fragments of the conversation. It's not just Chen. 5 other shops are in his pocket now. He used the same bank squeeze on all of us. Robert's heart began to race. He wasn't the only victim, he was just the first to be shamed. He kicked the door open and stepped into the room. Every head turned in shock. How many of us is he bleeding dry while we all sit here and stay silent in our pride? His voice was louder and harder than anyone had ever heard it. A long, suffocating silence followed. Then, slowly, one merchant in the back raised a trembling hand, then another, then 3 more. By the time the meeting ended, 12 of the 14 men in that room had their hands raised. Some were weeping openly. The scandal had finally erupted. Uncle Henry tried to regain control, shouting that this was private community business. Robert snapped back, his voice like a whip. Private? This is a parasite. He's killing us because he knows we're too proud to go to the police. The room fractured instantly. Half the men stood by Robert. The other half demanded he be silenced. Henry kicked him out of the building, but it didn't matter. The truth was out in the world, and it couldn't be taken back. Vinnie Moretti got word of the meeting in less than an hour. Nora Vance called him, her voice urgent. Chen is starting a fire, Vinnie. He's exposed the pattern. The neighborhood is getting restless, and that draws heat. Vinnie punched his mahogany desk in a rage. This cook needs to learn when to shut his mouth. Kane, standing in the corner, suggested, You want me to send him a physical reminder of who owns him? Vinnie thought for a long moment, his eyes narrow. Not yet. We need his name for the next big transfer, but Robert Chen just moved to the top of my list. The very next morning, Robert woke up to an anonymous text on his phone. Careful, Robert. You poked the bear and the bear is hungry. Maya is in real danger now. Robert called Claire Holloway in a total panic. She didn't offer comfort, she was blunt. Listen to me, Robert. Now you have to go all the way in. It's no longer an option. Vinnie is going to retaliate, and the only place you're safe is on the inside, under our protection. If you back out now, you're a dead man walking. Robert realized with a jolt of terror that by trying to do the right thing, he had made everything infinitely worse. He had 24 hours to make a choice, dive into the mouth of the beast or run and never look back. Both options were terrifying. What Robert didn't know was that accepting this federal mission would fundamentally rewrite his soul. Over the next 8 weeks, truths about his own identity, the nature of loyalty, and exactly how much a father is willing to sacrifice would come to light in ways that would first destroy and then slowly rebuild the man he thought he was. Maya Chen carried a weight of guilt that no 17-year-old should ever have to shoulder. Ever since her mother's death, she had felt secretly responsible for being too expensive. She knew the cost of every treatment, every doctor's visit. She had overheard the whispered, desperate phone calls. At night, she was plagued by nightmares where Lillian told her, "Every pill I took to stay alive cost you your future, Maya." The dilemma was a constant, gnawing pain. She desperately wanted to quit school and find a job to ease her father's burden, but she knew that doing so would kill the only dream that was keeping him alive. 2 weeks after Robert took the loan, a man in a sharp, expensive suit approached her at school. He claimed to be a recruiter for a private university. "You have the perfect profile for a full academic scholarship," he told her. Maya was so tempted, it would solve every financial problem in an instant. But something about the way he insisted and the way he wouldn't give her a direct office number set off a warning bell in her head. She stayed up late researching the school and found it was a degree mill, a front for a massive scam. The relief of being right was immediately replaced by a new, cold terror. How many traps were being set for her family in the tall grass? The full, dark truth about Robert Chen was deeper than anyone in the neighborhood could have guessed. The trauma of losing Lillian wasn't just about the grief. It was about the 8 agonizing months of watching the woman he loved fade away into nothing while he stood by, powerless. He had spent every cent on experimental treatments in a specialized clinic in Houston, a last, desperate gamble that had failed in weeks. The guilt he carried was a jagged stone in his heart. If I had just pushed her to go for a checkup a year earlier, we would have caught it. I was negligent. I killed her. It was irrational, but it lived in him like a parasite. On his first night as an official federal asset, Robert sat on the floor of his darkened living room, clutching a framed wedding photo, and finally let himself break. He sobbed for a full hour, his body shaking, whispering to the empty room, "Forgive me, Lillian. I'm going to lie, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to hide. I'm becoming everything we once hated. I'm so afraid. I'm afraid to die and leave her all alone. Forgive me for breaking our promise of a simple life." The next day, Claire Holloway visited him. She didn't offer platitudes. She saw the toll on his face. She shared her own story of being under deep cover years ago and how it had nearly severed her relationship with her own son. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Robert. It's doing the right thing while your heart is screaming for you to run. The bond between them solidified in that moment, two parents sacrificing their inner peace for a greater, invisible good. Vincent Moretti, the man the world called Vinny, hadn't been born a monster. He had grown up in the same hard-scrabble streets, joined the police force young, and truly believed he could make a difference. He was an excellent cop for 5 years, but the meager pay couldn't cover his daughter's mounting medical bills. The very first bribe he took was 23 years ago, $5,000 to miss a smuggling truck on a Tuesday night. He used every single cent of that blood money for his daughter's physical therapy. The second bribe was easier. By the 5th year, he was running his own crew of corrupt officers. He eventually left the force and built a criminal empire on the back of other people's desperation. In his own mind, he wasn't a criminal. He was a survivor who had mastered a broken system. The rich steal legally through tax loopholes. Politicians steal by the billions from the public. I steal to keep my child comfortable. What's the real difference? That was the lie he told himself every night. He saw Robert Chen as a pathetic hypocrite. This guy thinks he's better than the rest of us because he followed the rules. But when life finally squeezed him, he came crawling to me just like everyone else. Everyone has a price, Robert. You just found yours. One night, Vinny visited his daughter in her expensive private clinic. She didn't even recognize him anymore, her mind lost to a degenerative condition. He sat by her bed in the expensive, sterile room and cried in the silence. That was his terrifying moral gray area, a real, deep, paternal love used to justify the destruction of dozens of other families. The story of Robert's struggle eventually leaked to the local press. It started as a small post on a neighborhood blog and exploded onto the national news within 48 hours. The entire country seemed to have an opinion. Some hailed Robert as a hero for standing up to the sharks. Others called him a traitor who had betrayed his own community by exposing their internal struggles to the world. On social media, the video of the association meeting went viral, racking up millions of views. Fake news and conspiracies traveled faster than the truth. Chen has been a police informant for a decade, one post claimed. He owes millions to the triads and is making the whole thing up to save his skin, said another. Robert felt the crushing weight of that judgment everywhere he went. Old customers who had eaten at his table for 10 years now crossed the street just to avoid passing him. Maya came home from school in tears because other kids were saying her father was a common criminal. The isolation was a physical, heavy weight. Robert would sit in the center of his empty restaurant, staring at the chairs that used to be filled with laughter and life. He began to truly doubt his own sanity, wondering if he had lost his way forever. Nora Vance provided the most dangerous and unexpected complication. She was easily the smartest person in any room Vinny occupied. She had spent weeks meticulously checking Robert's books, his bank history, his tax filings, his old records from China. Something simply didn't add up for her. Robert had never had a single cent of debt in 30 years, and then suddenly he's $320,000 in the hole and takes a predatory shark loan in less than a week. Desperate people usually negotiate for months, looking for any other exit. Robert had folded in 7 days. Nora called Vinny, her voice cold and certain. "Robert Chen is a plant, Vinny. He's too clean, and his fall was too convenient. We need to test him before the big transfer." Vinny brushed her off at first, calling her paranoid, but Nora showed him the data patterns. Vinny's eyes narrowed into slits. "What do you suggest we do?" "A loyalty test. Make him get blood on his hands. If he's a cop or a snitch, he'll hesitate. And that hesitation will be the last thing he ever does." Robert faced his true moral crossroads on a humid Tuesday afternoon. Vinny called him into the back office of a social club. "I need a small favor, Robert. A guy down the street owes me 50 grand. He's late, and he's being disrespectful. I want you to go with Kane and help him collect. I want you to show me you're part of the team." Robert knew the game instantly. It wasn't about the 50,000. It was a test of his soul. If he went and stood by while Kane beat a man, he'd be an accomplice. He'd be a criminal in the eyes of the law and his own heart. If he refused, his cover would be shredded, and the operation would be over. Robert looked at Vinny's cold, expectant face. "Fine, I'll go." Claire Halloway, listening on the hidden wire, called him the second he stepped outside. "Robert, do not go to that shop. We can pull you out now." "I have to do this, Claire." "There is always another choice, Robert." "Not this time," he said, and he turned off the transmitter. Thursday afternoon, Robert and Kane walked into a small, dusty grocery store. The owner, a man named Mr. Wu, tried to explain that his wife was sick and he'd have the money by Monday. Kane didn't want to hear it. He started smashing the glass displays with a metal pipe. Monitors shattered, shelves were overturned. When Mr. Wu tried to grab Kane's arm to stop him, Kane shoved him with brutal force. The old man's head hit the corner of the counter with a sickening thud. Blood began to pool on the floor. Robert froze, the world slowing down. Kane turned to him, breathing hard, and pointed the pipe at him. "Hold the old man down while I finish the job. Show me you're one of us, Chen." It was the defining moment of his life. Robert looked at the bleeding, terrified man on the floor, and then he looked at Kane's dead, expectant eyes. He finally made his choice. "No." Kane blinked, confused. "What did you say?" "I said no. I'm not holding him down. And you're going to stop right now." Kane let out a dark laugh. "You giving me orders, cook?" Robert stepped between them and helped Mr. Wu up, handing him a clean cloth for his head. "We're leaving, Kane. Now." Kane didn't fight him then. He just pulled out his phone and called Vinny. "The cook's lost his mind. He's a bust." Robert's cover was officially shredded. Vinny was livid, a quiet, vibrating rage. He summoned Robert to his main office. "You disrespected me in front of my men, Robert. That's a death sentence in my world." Robert held his ground, his voice steady. "I won't be part of that kind of violence. I told you I'd move money, not break bones." "Then you're useless to me. I can do things Kane could never dream of. I can move your money through channels he can't even pronounce. But I won't do that." Vinny studied him for a long, agonizing minute. Nora Vance sat in the corner, whispered something in Vinny's ear and smiled. Vinny nodded slowly. "Fine, Robert. We'll test your special skills another way." He pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in complex symbols, numbers, and ancient-looking characters. "This is a key for an offshore encrypted account. It's worth tens of millions of dollars. No one on my team, not even Nora, has been able to crack the sequence. They say you were a genius back in China. Crack this by Saturday night, and I'll overlook your little rebellion. If you don't, well, you know the price." Robert looked at the paper and felt a cold chill. It was military-grade encryption, the kind used by high-level state actors. He could crack it, but that was the final brilliant trap. If he did, he would prove he had skills that a humble neighborhood cook could never possibly possess. Robert realized Nora knew exactly what she was doing. The code wasn't just a test. It could be the lever he needed to topple Vinny's entire empire if he played his cards perfectly. But Robert didn't know that Vinny was already preparing the final ambush. In 72 hours, in that warehouse on the edge of the river with Maya kidnapped and used as bait, it would all come down to one final desperate move. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. I read every single one of your stories. Leave a like if Robert's journey is touching your heart. Robert lost the Golden Dragon on a grey, rainy Tuesday in September. The sheriff arrived with the final eviction notice, and the locks were changed before noon. 30 years of hard work and 17 years of precious memories were reduced to a few cardboard boxes on the sidewalk. His few remaining loyal staff helped him pack in a heavy, mournful silence. Uncle Henry walked by on the other side of the street and didn't even turn his head. Robert sat on the cold linoleum floor where Lillian used to stand and cook her signature soups. His body began to shake with a violent, uncontrollable tremor. It wasn't the cold, it was a total, soul-deep collapse. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Claire Holloway had to physically walk into the building, lift him up by his arms, and guide him into her car. He was a broken man. Claire took him to a high-security safe house on the edge of the city. "You're off the grid for now, Robert. Stay inside." That night, she delivered the final crushing blow. "Robert, the operation is officially cancelled. You're compromised, and Vinny knows something is up. My superiors are pulling the plug. We're going to give you a new identity in another state and witness protection for a few months. And Maya? She goes with you, of course." Robert's anger flared into a white-hot flame. "You used my pain, you used my life, and now you toss me aside like trash when it gets difficult." Claire looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Robert. It's out of my hands. You said this mission mattered. You said it would save families." "It does matter, but I cannot risk your life or your daughter's life for a maybe." Robert stood up, his face set like stone. "Give me one more week. That's all I ask." "I can't authorize that." "Then don't. But I'm not quitting. Not after I've lost everything I ever worked for." Claire hesitated. She knew that pulling him now meant every ounce of his suffering would have been for nothing. 1 week, off the books. If this goes south, Robert, I was never here and I never knew you. Robert just nodded. He was on his own now. No backup, no wire, no safety net. Just a desperate father against an empire. The very next day, a miracle happened. Maya showed up at the safe house door. She had followed Claire from the office. They stood in the cramped hallway in silence until Maya finally spoke. "Dad, I'm terrified, but I've never been more proud to be your daughter." Robert's eyes burned with hot tears. "Maya, I am so sorry for everything. For the lies, for the debt, for losing the restaurant." She stepped forward and cut him off with a fierce hug. "Mom always told me that real courage isn't about never falling down, Dad. It's about getting up every single time you hit the ground, and you always get up, no matter how hard they hit you." They sat together and cried for the first time since Lillian's funeral. Before she was taken back to safety, Maya left him a small note on the kitchen table. "You are a good man, Dad. Never let them tell you otherwise. I love you." Those simple words rebuilt the man inside Robert Chen. Robert spent the entire night planning his final move. He remembered Lillian telling him once that his true strength wasn't being perfect or never making mistakes. It was his stubborn refusal to ever give up on the people he loved. He still had the code Vinny had given him. He realized that if he cracked it and delivered the data to the right people, the high-level federal prosecutors, not just the local branch, he could sink Vinny Moretti forever. It required facing the monster head-on in his own den. It required a level of courage he wasn't sure he possessed. He made his move on Saturday night. He called Vinny and told him the code was cracked. He'd meet him at the warehouse. He would record the entire meeting, get a full confession on tape, and set up a dead man's switch that would automatically upload the recording to a trusted prosecutor if he didn't check in by midnight. He fully accepted the cost. He might not walk out of that building alive. He wrote a final, heartbreaking letter to Maya. "Everything I ever did, I did out of love for you. Become that doctor. Be happy. Remember the father who tried until his last breath." He visited Lillian's grave one last time in the dark. "I'll see you soon, Lillian. One way or another, this ends tonight." He went back to the safe house, cracked the final sequence of the code, and tucked the old family photo into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. He was at peace with the terror now. Robert parked his car 3 blocks away from the docks. He walked slowly through the fog, controlling his breathing like a soldier, a tiny, high-gain recorder sewn into the hem of his shirt. The heavy metal warehouse door creaked open, a sound like a scream. A blinding floodlight hit him, forced him to squint. Vinny Moretti sat in a high-back chair in the center of the room, flanked by Kane and the rest of the crew. Nora Vance was in the back, her fingers flying over a tablet. Robert was grabbed, shoved into a chair, and zip-tied tight. "I have your code, Vinny," Robert said, his voice echoing in the rafters. "You seem awfully confident for a guy tied to a chair," Vinny sneered, leaning forward. "I'm exactly where I need to be," Robert replied calmly. He began the mental dance, Fibonacci sequences, I Ching hexagrams, RSA encryption keys. His mind was a razor. Vinny began to lose his patience. "You have 5 minutes, Robert, or I start breaking your daughter's fingers in the other room." Robert didn't flinch. He finished the final line. "It's done." Vinny reached out a greedy hand for the paper, but Robert pulled it back. "Why did you pick me, Vinny, of all the people in the city?" Vinny let out a dark, mocking laugh. "Because you're a sucker, Robert. An honest, hard-working sucker. You actually believed the system would reward you for being good, and look at you. You're broke, your wife is dead, and you're tied to a chair in a dump. At least I'm honest about being a predator." Robert nodded slowly. "You're right about one thing, Vinny. The system is unfair. My wife died because the world failed us. You spend on a gold chain what I needed to save her life, but I choose to resist that darkness." Robert suddenly switched to fluent, rapid Mandarin, a phrase about the honor of ancestors. Vinny tensed up, confused. "I'm speaking the language I studied for 10 years as a high-level military cryptographer before I ever came to this country to be a cook." Nora Vance stepped forward, her face turning ashen. "I didn't crack your code for you, Vinny. I spent the last 50 minutes getting you to confess to every crime you've committed on a live federal frequency. It's all recorded, and it's already in the hands of the U.S. attorney." Nora checked her tablet, her hands shaking. "He's telling the truth, Vinny. There's a massive data transmission. It's over." Vinny went deathly white. Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer by the second. "FBI! Nobody move! Drop the weapons!" The warehouse doors were kicked in, and a dozen agents swarmed the room with tactical lights and rifles. In mere minutes, the entire crew was in handcuffs, including a silent, defeated Vinny Moretti. Claire Holloway walked into the room and personally cut Robert's ties. "We got it all, Robert. The full confession, the account numbers, everything." As Vinny was being led away in chains, he stopped and looked at Robert with a look of bitter, soul-deep respect. "You played the part perfectly, Robert." Robert looked him in the eye one last time. "I wasn't playing a part, Vinny. I just never quit." The empire was seized, millions of dollars were frozen, and 17 families were finally freed from the shadow of their debt. Justice had finally been served. At the federal building later that night, the neighborhood merchants began to arrive. Mr. Wu hugged Robert, tears streaming down his face. Uncle Henry arrived and apologized publicly, his head bowed in shame. Maya ran into the room and threw her arms around her father, weeping with relief. "You did it, Dad, you really did it." Robert held her as tight as he could. "We did it, Maya. We did it together." Larry. Robert was later honored by the city, but to him, the only win that mattered was being able to look his daughter in the eye and know there were no more lies between them. 6 months later, Robert Chen woke up at 7 a.m., a luxury he had never known before. He lived in a bright, simple apartment with a small balcony garden where he grew his own herbs. He still believed in the inherent goodness of people, but he was no longer naive. Maya was thriving in her first year of medical school, her dream finally within reach. Claire Halloway had become a close family friend, almost like an aunt to Maya. The Golden Dragon had officially reopened as a community-owned cooperative, a place where other struggling immigrants could find a fair start. Robert didn't see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a father who had stayed in the fight when everyone else told him to lie down. But to the neighborhood, he was the living proof that a common man with an uncommon heart can change the world. Robert and Maya went to the cemetery on a bright, sunny morning. "Hey, Lillian," he whispered, placing fresh flowers on the stone. There was no more crushing guilt, only a sweet, lingering memory of the woman he loved. "Mom would be so incredibly proud of you, wouldn't she?" Maya asked softly. "She'd probably yell at me for taking such a stupid risk first," Robert laughed, a real, honest sound. "But yeah, I think she'd be proud." They stood in the quiet of the morning, at peace with the past. Robert's journey teaches us that real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking action when you are at your most terrified. It teaches us that it's never, ever too late to rewrite your story, and that true justice only happens when we refuse to accept the unfair as normal. And what about you? Have you ever felt like it was too late to change? Have you ever felt too small to make a difference in a big, cold world? Robert Chen proves that you are more powerful than you could ever imagine. Share your own experience in the comments below. Your story of courage might be the exact spark that someone else needs to hear today. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you believe in second chances. Next week, we'll bring you the story of a woman who discovered a dark secret her late husband had kept for 40 years and decided to seek justice herself. Remember, courage has no expiration date, and love is the ultimate motivator. See you soon.